Hello there. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hello to Marion and Kelly and A Giggles and Mary. You were the first four names I saw up today. I am so sorry that we've been sporadic for the last 2 weeks, but I'm back from Austin, Texas, where Laura and I had a lovely time over the weekend. Back home and don't have anything immediate in the way, so we have a good stretch ahead of us, with any luck, to continue with The Woman in White, Wilkie Collins's masterpiece, that I am thoroughly enjoying reading to you all. We're about halfway through. It's been very exciting at times. I'm going to give a little recap of the book for anyone who might be new. If you're new, welcome. This is Fireside Reading. I'm Gildart Jackson, and every day at 5 Pacific, when I can, I sit in front of the fire and read to anyone who might like to join us. And over the course of however long the book takes, we read wonderful old books. I do eventually put them all up on YouTube. There are about 20 books up there now that you can watch and listen to in your own time, if you would like to. We are in the middle of our spring of murder mysteries and thrillers. And this thriller I've always wanted to read, having done an audio book, narrated an audio book about Wilkie Collins. And I thought it would be fun to read this one. This is considered his best book by many people. And it is the story of Walter Hartwright, a young artist who gets a job in the opening few chapters and goes up to the north of England to be the drawing teacher of two stepsisters, Miss Laura Fairley and Miss Marion Holcomb. They have the same mother, different fathers. And he, of course, immediately falls in love with Laura, who's very beautiful. But Laura, who is the heiress to the big estate up there, she is already betrothed. She promised her now dead father that she would marry Sir Percival Glyde. Sir Percival Glyde might be okay at the beginning, but the more we find out about him, the more we realize he might be rather a dastardly character. He has sent off to an asylum a woman, a mysterious woman who crops up through the book, who wears white. Her name's Anne Catherick. And we don't yet know much about Anne Catherick, except that she doesn't like Sir Percival Glyde, and she tried to warn Laura against marrying him. But she did marry him. Walter Hartwright took off, went on a round-the-world tour on a boat. This is what they sort of did in these days. And he's the artist, resident artist, to draw all the things that they're discovering. So he's away. And the book is told initially by him. He leaves. It's picked up by the diary of Miss Holcomb, which is what we're in right now. We're in the 4th chapter of her diary recitations. We're in the second part of the 4th chapter. And what's just happened is that Sir Percival has heard that Anne Catherick's mother visited while he was away on honeymoon. Also present is Count Fosco, his friend, and Count Fosco's wife, Madame Fosco. We don't really know about them. They're very interesting. Count Fosco is a large Italian man who seems to have everything, be a bit of a puppeteer. But we don't quite know, except that Marion and Laura don't like him. And it's getting clearer and clearer that Sir Percival is not very nice as well. So Sir Percival discovers that Anne Catherick might be around. He gets his horses together and he's going to ride out. But before he wants to do that, he wants her to sign something. His wife, Laura, to sign something. We have a suspicion it's to do with her money, but we don't yet know what that is. So, what has just happened is that she has said, I'm not going to sign until I can read, very sensible, what you want me to sign, and he doesn't like that, so he's going to go away. And we think, look, and Catholic, but we don't exactly know what he's going to do. So that's where we're at. I wonder how my recitation of events was. I hope it was understandable. It's been a bit of a while before we've read the book. So, welcome to a fireside reading of The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is part of what they call the second epoch, chapter 4, part 2. And it starts with Sir Percival saying, "If you don't give me your signature when I come back tomorrow," the rest was lost in the noise of his opening the bookcase cupboard again and locking up the parchment once more. He took his hat and gloves off the table and made for the door. Laura and I drew back to let him pass. "Remember, tomorrow," he said to his wife, and went out. We waited to give him time to cross the hall and to drive away. The Count approached us while we were standing near the door. "You have just seen Percival at his worst, Miss Holcomb," he said. "As his old friend, I am sorry for him and ashamed of him. As his old friend, I promise you that he shall not break out tomorrow in the same disgraceful manner in which he has broken out today." Laura had taken my arm while he was speaking, and she pressed it significantly when he had done. It would have been a hard trial to any woman to stand by and see the office of apologist for her husband's misconduct quietly assumed by his male friend in her own house, and it was a trial to her. I thanked the Count civilly and let her out. Yes, I thanked him, for I felt already with a sense of inexpressible helplessness and humiliation that it was either his interest or his caprice to make sure of my continuing to reside at Blackwater Park. And I knew, after Sir Percival's conduct to me, that without the support of the Count's influence, I could not hope to remain there. His influence, the influence of all others that I dreaded most, was actually the one tie which now held me to Laura in the hour of her utmost need. We heard the wheels of the dog-cart crashing on the gravel of the drive as we came into the hall. Sir Percival had started on his journey. "Where is he going to, Marian?" Laura whispered. "Every fresh thing he does seems to terrify me about the future. Have you any suspicions?" After what she had undergone that morning, I was unwilling to tell her my suspicions. "How should I know his secrets?" I said evasively. "I wonder if the housekeeper knows," she persisted. "Certainly not," I replied. "She must be quite as ignorant as we are." Laura shook her head doubtfully. "Did you not hear from the housekeeper that there was a report of Anne Catherick having been seen in this neighborhood? Don't you think he may have gone away to look for her?" "I would rather compose myself, Laura, by not thinking about it at all, and after what's happened, you had better follow my example. Come into my room and rest and quiet yourself a little." We sat down together close to the window and let the fragrant summer air breathe over our faces. "I am ashamed to look at you, Marian," she said, "after what you submitted to downstairs for my sake. Oh, my own love, I'm almost heartbroken when I think of it, and I will try to make it up to you. I will indeed." "Hush, hush," I replied. "Don't talk so. What is the trifling mortification of my pride compared to the dreadful sacrifice of your happiness?" You heard what he said to me, she went on quickly and vehemently. You heard the words, but you don't know what they meant. You don't know why I threw down the pen and turned my back on him. She rose in sudden agitation and walked about the room. I have kept many things from your knowledge, Marion. My fear of distressing you and making you unhappy at the outset of our new lives. You don't know how he has used me. And yet you ought to know, for you saw how he used me today. You heard him sneer at my presuming to be scrupulous. You heard him say I had made a virtue of necessity in marrying him. She sat down again, her face deeply flushed, and her hands twisted and twined together in her lap. I can't tell you about it now, she said. I shall burst out crying if I tell you now. Later, Marion, when I am more sure of myself. My poor head aches, darling. Aches, aches, aches. Where is your smelling bottle? Let me talk to you about yourself. I wish I'd given him my signature for your sake. Shall I give it to him tomorrow? I would rather compromise myself than compromise you. After your taking my part against him, he will lay all the blame on you if I refuse again. What shall we do? Oh, for a friend to help us and advise us. A friend we could really trust. She sighed bitterly. I saw in her face that she was thinking of Harrington, saw it the more plainly because her last words set me thinking of him too. In 6 months only from her marriage, we wanted the faithful service he had offered to us in his farewell words. How little I once thought that we should ever want it at all. We must do what we can to help ourselves, I said. Let us try to talk it over calmly, Laura. Let us do all in our power to decide for the best. Putting what she knew of her husband's embarrassments and what I had heard of his conversation with the lawyer together, we arrived necessarily at the conclusion that the parchment in the library had been drawn up for the purpose of borrowing money, and that Laura's signature was absolutely necessary to fit it for the attainment of Sir Percival's object. The second question, concerning the nature of the legal contract by which the money was to be obtained, and the degree of personal responsibility to which Laura might subject herself if she signed it in the dark, involved considerations which lay far beyond any knowledge and experience that either of us possessed. My own convictions led me to believe that the hidden contents of the parchment concealed a transaction of the meanest and the most fraudulent kind. I had not formed this conclusion in consequence of Sir Percival's refusal to show the writing or to explain it, for that refusal might well have proceeded from his obstinate disposition and his domineering temper alone. My sole motive for distrusting his honesty sprang from the change which I had observed in his language and his manners at Blackwater Park, a change which convinced me that he had been acting a part throughout the whole period of his probation at Limmeridge House. His elaborate delicacy, his ceremonious politeness, which harmonized so agreeably with Mr. Gilmore's old-fashioned notions, his modesty with Laura, his candor with me, his moderation with Mr. Fairley. All these were the artifices of a mean, cunning, and brutal man who had dropped his disguise when his practiced duplicity had gained its end and had openly shown himself in the library on that very day. I say nothing of the grief which this discovery caused me on Laura's account, for it is not to be expressed by any words of mine. I only refer to it at all because it decided me to oppose her signing the parchment, whatever the consequences might be, unless she was first made acquainted with the contents. Under these circumstances, the one chance for us when tomorrow came was to be provided with an objection to giving the signature which might rest on sufficiently firm commercial or legal grounds to shake Sir Percival's resolution, and to make him suspect that we two women understood the laws and obligations of business as well as himself. After some pondering, I determined to write to the only honest man within reach whom we could trust to help us discreetly in our forlorn situation. The man was Mr. Gilmore's partner, Mr. Kyrle, who conducted the business now that our old friend had been obliged to withdraw from it and to leave London on account of his health. I explained to Laura that I had Mr. Gilmore's authority for placing implicit confidence in his partner's integrity, discretion, and accurate knowledge of all her affairs, and with her full approval, I sat down at once to write the letter. I began by stating our position to Mr. Kyrle, exactly as it was, and then asked for his advice in return, expressed in plain, downright terms which he could comprehend without any danger of misinterpretations and mistakes. My letter was as short as I could possibly make it, and was, I hope, unencumbered by needless apologies and needless details. Just as I was about to put the address on the envelope, an obstacle was discovered by Laura, which, in the effort and preoccupation of writing, had escaped my mind altogether. "How are we to get the answer in time?" she asked. "Your letter will not be delivered in London before tomorrow morning, and the post will not bring the reply here till the morning after." The only way of overcoming this difficulty was to have the answer brought to us from the lawyer's office by a special messenger. I wrote a postscript to the effect, begging that the messenger might be dispatched with the reply by the 11 o'clock morning train, which would bring him to our station at 20 minutes past 1, and so enable him to reach Blackwater Park by 2 o'clock at the latest. He was to be directed to ask for me, to answer no questions addressed to him by anyone else, and to deliver his letter into no hands but mine. In case Sir Percival should come back tomorrow before 2 o'clock, I said to Laura, the wisest plan for you to adopt is to be out in the grounds all the morning with your book or your work, and not to appear at the house till the messenger has had time to arrive with the letter. I will wait here for him all the morning to guard against any misadventures or mistakes. By following this arrangement, I hope and believe we shall avoid being taken by surprise. Let us go down to the drawing-room now. We may excite suspicion if we remain shut up together too long. Suspicion? She repeated. Whose suspicion can we excite, now that Sir Percival has left the house? Do you mean Count Fosco? Perhaps I do, Laura. You are beginning to dislike him as much as I do, Marian. No, not to dislike him. Dislike is always more or less associated with contempt. I can see nothing in the Count to despise. You are not afraid of him, are you? Perhaps I am, a little. Afraid of him after his interference in our favor today? Yes. I am more afraid of his interference than I am of Sir Percival's violence. Remember what I said to you in the library. Whatever you do, Laura, don't make an enemy of the Count. We went downstairs. Laura entered the drawing-room while I proceeded across the hall with my letter in my hand to put it into the post-bag which hung against the wall opposite to me. The house door was open, and as I crossed past it, I saw Count Fosco and his wife standing, talking together on the steps outside, with their faces turned towards me. The Countess came into the hall rather hastily and asked if I had leisure enough for 5 minutes' private conversation. Feeling a little surprised by such an appeal from such a person, I put my letter into the bag and replied that I was quite at her disposal, She took my arm with unaccustomed friendliness and familiarity, and instead of leading me into an empty room, drew me out with her to the belt of turf which surrounded the large fish pond. As we passed the Count on the steps, he bowed and smiled, and then went at once into the house, pushing the hall door to after him, but not actually closing it. The Countess walked me gently round the fish pond. I expected to be made the depository of some extraordinary confidence, and I was astonished to find that Madame Fosco's communication for my private ear was nothing more than a polite assurance of her sympathy for me after what had happened in the library. Her husband had told her of all that had passed, and of the insolent manner in which Sir Percival had spoken to me. This information had so shocked and distressed her, on my account and on Laura's, that she had made up her mind, if anything of the sort happened again, to mark her sense of Sir Percival's outrageous conduct by leaving the house. The Count had approved of her idea, and she now hoped that I approved of it too. I thought this a very strange proceeding on the part of such a remarkably reserved woman as Madame Fosco, especially after the interchange of sharp speeches which had passed between us during the conversation in the boat-house of that very morning. However, it was my plain duty to meet a polite and friendly advance on the part of one of my elders with a polite and friendly reply. I answered the Countess accordingly in her own tone, and then, thinking we had said all that was necessary on either side, made an attempt to get back to the house. But Madame Fosco seemed resolved not to part with me, and to my unspeakable amazement resolved also to talk. Hitherto the most silent of women, she now persecuted me with fluent conventionalities on the subject of married life, on the subject of Sir Percival and Laura, on the subject of her own happiness, on the subject of the late Mr. Fairley's conduct to her in the matter of her legacy, and on half a dozen other subjects besides, until she had detained me walking round and round the fish pond for more than half an hour, and had quite wearied me out. Whether she discovered this or not, I cannot say, but she stopped as abruptly as she had begun, looked towards the house door, resumed her icy manner in a moment, and dropped my arm of her own accord before I could think of an excuse for accomplishing my own release from her. As I pushed open the door and entered the hall, I found myself suddenly face to face with the Count again. He was just putting a letter into the post-bag. After he had dropped it in and had closed the bag, he asked me where I had left Madame Fosco. I told him, and he went out at the hall door immediately to join his wife. His manner when he spoke to me was so unusually quiet and subdued that I turned and looked after him, wondering if he were ill or out of spirits. Why my next proceeding was to go straight up to the post-bag and take out my letter and look at it again with a vague distrust on me, and why the looking at it for the second time instantly suggested the idea to my mind of sealing the envelope for its greater security, are mysteries which are either too deep or too shallow for me to fathom. Women, as everybody knows, constantly act on impulses which they cannot explain even to themselves, and I can only suppose that one of those impulses was the hidden cause of my unaccountable conduct on this occasion. Whatever influence animated me, I found myself I found cause to congratulate myself on having opened it as soon as I prepared to seal the letter in my own room. I had originally closed the envelope in the usual way by moistening the adhesive point and pressing it on the paper beneath, and when I now tried it with my finger, after a lapse of full 3/4 of an hour, the envelope opened on the instant, without sticking or tearing. Perhaps I had fastened it insufficiently. Perhaps there might have been some defect in the adhesive gum. Or perhaps... No, it is quite revolting enough to feel that third conjecture stirring in my mind. I would rather not see it confronting me in plain black and white. I almost dread tomorrow. So much depends on my discretion and self-control. There are 2 precautions, at all events, which I am sure not to forget. I must be careful to keep up friendly appearances with the Count, and I must be well on my guard when the messenger from the office comes here with the answer to my letter. Thank you so much for joining me. That was reading 32. All right, I'll see you all tomorrow, same time and place, I hope, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading. I'll be here, but I hope you can join me. Until then, everyone, do stay very, very well.